And welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. We want to bring you the latest on what was really a remarkable story that broke late Friday in the New York Times. We didn't have time to address it then. According to what are apparently high-level sources within the Department of Justice, in 2017, the FBI secretly began an investigation into whether the president is, in fact, a Russian agent. The FBI apparently believed that President Trump could be a one-man sleeper cell, personally taking direct orders from his handlers in Moscow and working from within the Oval Office to subvert this country. The FBI said they believe that could have happened, so they spied, apparently, on the President of the United States. Well, shocking doesn't even begin to describe this story. Nothing like this has ever happened in this country. These allegations are literally without precedent. That is not overstatement. And by the way, the allegations are not true. The FBI did not find that Donald Trump is a Russian agent. No charges were ever filed against him. None will be. But an equally important question remains unanswered. How did this happen? Deciding that a sitting president should be investigated for treason is not a small thing. Officials within the FBI had to push for this investigation and then marshal evidence to justify it. Leaders at the very highest levels of the agency had to sign off on the whole thing. All of that happened. But on what grounds exactly? That's what we would need to know in order to understand this. Well, thanks to the Times story, we have some sense of the answer. And if you're imagining a secret transmitter covered in Cyrillic script discovered hidden in the Lincoln bedroom, no, think again. There were no cloak and dagger clues in this case, apparently. The FBI assumed that Donald Trump might be a Russian agent not because of anything he did in secret, but because of things he said in public, very public, standing on a stage, on camera, while running for president. Here's one of them.
There's nothing I can think of that I'd rather do than have Russia friendly as opposed to the way they are right now. Wouldn't it be nice if we actually got along, as an example, with Russia? I'm all for it.
That was then-candidate Trump speaking at a press conference in Florida at Doral in July of 2016. According to the FBI, the words you just heard are evidence that Trump may have betrayed this country. That's their view. But there's another way to look at those words. Maybe Trump is right. Russia, is a nuclear-armed power on the other side of the planet. It does not have the power to invade the United States. It can't close international shipping lanes. It does not seriously threaten our key allies like Japan or Great Britain. Is there some reason, then, that we should inherently be in conflict with Russia? Is there, moreover, vast public support in this country for fighting a proxy war in Syria with the Kremlin? And how many American parents are anxious to send their kids to die for the territorial integrity of Ukraine, an issue that we're supposed to think is very important? Well, outside a few neighborhoods in Washington, not very many people, it turns out. So Trump did raise a fair question at that press conference in 2016. In Washington, saying that out loud is considered treason.
Vladimir Putin policies almost being parroted by Donald Trump. You had Trump say only nice things about Putin. He never spoke ill about Russia.
Never spoke ill about Russia. That's the evidence a United States senator holds up to prove that the president may be working for our enemies. So maybe Trump does like Russia. Who knows? By the way, he's allowed to if he wants to. It doesn't make him evil. It just means he disagrees with prevailing orthodoxy in D.C., and that's okay. We're supposed to have spirited debates over questions like this, but no longer. Policy differences are now criminal offenses. Today on CNN, professional dumb person Max Boot listed 18 reasons that the president may be a Russian spy. If you looked at the reasons, a lot of them turned out to be political positions that Boot just doesn't agree with. Firing Jim Comey, pulling out of Syria, criticizing the European Union. And this is our favorite one. We're quoting, supporting populists. So the Permanent War Caucus in Washington has succeeded in criminalizing dissent from their agenda. That's what this is. And by the way, if it were happening in a less developed country, we'd know exactly what to call it. It's an attempted coup. A political leader gets elected on a platform that law enforcement agencies don't like. So those agencies try to put him in jail. It happens all the time in other places. Now it's happening here. Former FBI lawyer and anti-Trump activist Lisa Page described the FBI's thinking in her closed-door testimony before Congress. Russia is the most dangerous country in the world, Page reportedly said, because Russia works to, quote, weaken our ability, America's ability, and the West's ability to spread our democratic ideals, end quote. So spreading our democratic ideals, as with the Iraq War, is now the most important thing that America does, the one thing we must defend at all costs. When did FBI lawyers start talking like neocon propagandists? No wonder Max Boot is on board with this. Our entire media and political classes are with Max Boot and Lisa Page, too. They have lost their minds. This past September, NBC News breathlessly reported that Russia was using, quote, sophisticated microwaves to cause brain damage to U.S. diplomats in Cuba. No surprise there, really. It sounds like something those dastardly Russians would do just because. Well, now, months later, scientists have determined that the Kremlin probably didn't have anything to do with that. The real culprit? Noise from crickets. And by the way, not even Russian crickets. Indies short-tailed crickets. Non-Slavic crickets. Whatever. The media didn't correct the story. They ignored it and they moved on. They know who the bad guys are. Evidence does not deter their storyline. Russian espionage is so widespread, in fact, that the act of denying that you spied for Russia is now confirmation that you did. Watch.
Well, Christy, the president's tweet trying to make the case that he's not a Russian asset really just undercuts his own defense. The president's tweet couldn't have been scripted better if it was written by Putin himself. Someone has to have told the president that undercutting the FBI, insulting past presidents and members of the U.S. government, and criticizing their actions to keep us safe is really advancing Russia's mission. Our own intelligence community has said that those very things are exactly what Russia is after. So in the president's response, he's really just making Russia's job easier.
You say you're not a Russian agent, therefore you're a Russian agent. Who puts these people on TV? That's a question we should think about. Over the weekend, speaking of television, CNN President Jeff Zucker declared that anyone who isn't spreading fear of Russia is doing the bidding of Russia. Zucker didn't say that himself, of course. He rarely speaks in public. Instead, he sent his marionette out, as he often does, to deliver the message.
I was watching Good Morning America this weekend, and both mornings they led with snowstorms and scares at malls and other stories, and not this. And I just keep wondering if the public is ill-served if we don't make it really clear what the stakes of this story are. How can a morning show not lead with this drama, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think plenty of times we lead with this drama.
On cable, I agree.
So the eunuch heads to the steps of the palace and reads the proclamation. Message received. Thank you very much. But take 3 steps back. Is the media's problem really that it doesn't talk about Russia enough? Doesn't seem like that's the problem.
Whether the president was working for Russia.
Whether Donald Trump was secretly working on behalf of Russia.
Whether Trump was secretly working on behalf of Russia.
Whether President Trump was secretly working on behalf of Russia.
Whether the president was secretly working with Russia against America.
Whether Trump was secretly working on behalf of the Russians.
Whether Trump was secretly working on behalf of Russia.
Whether President Trump was working on behalf of Russia.
Whether President Trump was working on Russia's behalf.
Whether the sitting president was secretly working for Russia.
Whether President Trump was working for Russia from the Oval Office.
Does every show on cable news have the same writer? Well, yeah, it's the DNC. You've heard the script so many times that it's like background noise, muzak in an elevator. We never pause to ask the obvious question, which is, does it make sense? Does what they're saying logically add up, that Trump is doing the bidding of Russia? I don't know. Let's assess it just for a second. If you were Russia, let's say you're Vladimir Putin, how would you try to undermine American interests? Well, you'd probably try to get America stuck in costly, expensive foreign wars. You'd look at Iraq and Afghanistan, you would say, those wars have made America much weaker. Why not try and replicate that experience in, say, Syria and Libya? You might encourage America to do that. You might also encourage the U.S. to adopt a self-destructive energy policy. You'd have the American government sharply restrict the exploration of oil and natural gas in the name of the environment so that America produces less energy. Why would you do that? Because global energy prices would rise and the U.S. would have to import more. Who would that benefit? Russia, a petrostate. Their economy is dependent on energy. But Trump, and this is weird behavior for a secret Russian agent, has done just the opposite of that. The United States, for the first time in my lifetime, is an energy exporter. In fact, it's the largest producer of oil and gas in the world. Is that good for Russia? No, it's not. Who's pushing the opposite? Oh, weirdly, it's the left. They're the ones pushing a Green New Deal that would have this country shutting down oil and gas wells across the nation. Someday we're going to look back in shame and confusion and wonder how so many supposedly smart people went completely off the deep end. That's the task for future historians. For now, it is time for some radical transparency. Last fall, the president ordered the declassification and release of Carter Page's FISA application. How did an American citizen, who clearly didn't act as an agent for Russia, have his phones tapped and his email read by the federal government? On what basis? We have a right to know that. We still don't. So the president ordered it. He also ordered the unredacted release of all text messages related to the Russia investigation sent by Jim Comey, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Bruce Orr, the FBI officials. Well, instead of releasing them, the Department of Justice dithered for reasons that were never really clear. The president got distracted, and we've never seen those documents. It's obvious at this point that the reason for not releasing them isn't protecting American national security. They just leaked the information about the FBI investigation to the New York Times on Friday. Clearly, they have no problem leaking information when it helps them. They haven't been released because those documents might embarrass the FBI. This endless shadow investigation has caused vastly more harm to this country than any Russian Facebook ad. The president should order the declassification of all documents related to this. It's clearly an abuse of federal power. If you want to restore confidence in the federal government, bring in some sunlight. Tell the DOJ to do that. And if DOJ personnel refuse to do that, fire them and replace them with people who understand that they serve elected leaders, which is to say the electorate, which is to say voters, the people, and not the other way around. The president appears afraid to do this. He seems to be intimidated by his own lawyers. But why? What can official Washington do to him now? Call him a Russian agent? Plan to impeach him? Too late. They already have.